Okay, so one of the things I kept thinking about was I was like, Hasbro owns G.I. Joe, owns the Transformers. I was sitting back, like, so years ago, I remember thinking about this and hearing about, like, the various IDW, like, kind of like what if sort of style things they would do. They'd put multiple different IPs together, and Beckloff would talk about it. The stuff sounded really good. I actually, it's the kind of thing that now and then, I keep thinking about doing, but then I'm like, okay, do I absolutely need to buy like some kind of graphic novel of IDW stuff or things like that? And probably somebody will say yes, you do. But so anyway, one of the things that I thought was absolutely gold. There was a generation of GI Joe that kind of came with and a little after Cobra Law and all that, where they had sort of ridiculous weapons. They had like the BFGs, the big effing guns, and like weird like guns, like where it would have like a shotgun attached to like a mini Gatling gun thing that would have like crazy stuff, like to really outlandish stuff. But but the figures were like kind of cool and chunky in a lot of ways. The weapons had it was something had been done, like where they were going to put money into this. Now I don't know if the idea is that it was supposed to pay off a certain way and it didn't, but from what I understand, it didn't. That ends up not panning out in the long run, or it was just that the young weren't as into it. But this was one of these things that I was sitting back and I'm like, you have the Transformers, you have all of these various vehicles and stuff, you have G.I. Joe, you have the absolutely natural merger of these two IPs. And once people started messing with a lot of the IPs in various ways, I'm like, okay, somebody is sitting on a platinum mine of G.I. Joe meets Transformers as like, and kind of restarting the series, because Transformers was very healthy in that Transformers kept rebooting various generations of stuff and kind of coming up with new ways of interpreting the old storyline, and with the Beast Wars, and I was very impressed. I was like, there's a lot that could happen here, and they don't need to be confined to anything. They don't need a contiguous universe, really. The kinds of fans of this don't require a contiguous universe. So then the next thing that I was thinking about was, I was like, yeah, so you have that, and then this introduces the idea of characters that would be like, the cybernetically enhanced kind of character. You'd have something that would have its bleed over into Marvel. And because so many of these things were bleeding into each other in one way or another, or possibly, or there was so much potential there. And I'm like, you really have just a platinum mine waiting. And also, oh yeah, because if people remember right, remember how G.I. Joe had a bunch of things like the Street Fighter characters, and and various like pro wrestlers, stuff like that. So the fact that it would pull in entire other IPs, there was so much potential there. And I was sitting there like, now that everyone saw how Batman and the Justice League and all that as animation had done so well, they're seeing how all these video games with these various characters, Marvel versus Capcom, all this, there's certain IPs that it would make perfect sense to have them team up in some way and have and even a unique thing unto itself, because the Transformers they would have access to a lot more various models and toys and things, and so it was one of those things. I sat back and I'm like, this has to be, and then when I found out, like, no, they do, all these companies, they do own all these IPs. They could put these IPs together and make a platinum mine. They're sitting on a platinum mine. So I was just sitting back like, why wouldn't this occur to somebody? Or like at least be flown like a weather balloon, like there's a rumor of something like this being done. I mean, a long time ago. I mean, I'm talking about like 10 years ago. This easily, I mean, like you could have seen prior to 10 years or 15 years ago, for the 5 years it would have taken to develop, this would have easily been something like duh. And then especially if it was a series of video games as well, whether tied in or not. And I just sat back and I'm like, how are they not seeing that? An IP like Buck Rogers, and so this kind of campy, over-the-top space show, which I guess somebody said like the Orville has that quality to it, that it has kind of a, but it's also that it's incredibly good and it's funny. Apparently, I was like, that it's actually good sci-fi and it's kind of funny. And so I was sitting back and I'm like, with things like Buck Rogers and IPs of various sorts that were space IPs, because there's goofy space IPs out there that got to be still around and unused. Or like you had the Thundercats, and that somehow they were able to even figure out how to totally botch things like the Thundercats, the imagery and style for the new He-Man, that they nailed that, but then making it the not He-Man show, that was just that was a typical failure. That was a biff, total felting through the table, biffity boof boff, and biffity boof boff, and so it's, I've been thinking about, like, there's these varieties of IPs that you kind of can't understand. How are these companies not making a fortune off these IPs? How are they not finding anybody that can take these absolute gems of old stories and IPs with action figures and make it work at all? I mean, like, how is that even possible? And so more and more I'm just finding like that it's I think that's a real sign of the end of an end of something, that there's really an era of ability that is ending, and it does, it freaks me out. It totally freaks me out. I mean, because it's right there. It's, I mean, a platinum mine right there, and that these companies have sunk, I mean, $250 million into some of these endeavors. Not a single action figure sold. Nobody would want one. I mean, it's such amazing cinematic failures that, I mean, so the reason why I could say, like, to me it's amazing, such amazing failures, is to see Saturday cartoons that sold toys that you couldn't believe they sold toys. Like you couldn't believe, like, somebody bought that toy, like that there was people, and that to this day you'll find these odd toys that you're like, there's really collectors of that, and it's like, oh yeah, so that's, and yeah, I just thought about that, like, that the whole idea that you can't sell these characters, that the only way that you can kind of get these characters the way that you want them is when you mod a video game. That's amazing. Like there's obviously such open contempt for being creative and creating something that people want and liking the audience, and I mean, and being a part of the fun, really. That's the big one, is being a part of the fun. Yeah, and that idea that because they loved it too, they made a movie. They helped make a movie. They did this. They've been looking forward to this opportunity all their life because of how much they love it. And then you see, like, it was like this kind of, I trusted you to make a good movie, But all right, later.